How's it going, everybody? This is Sean with Panasonic LUMIX, and we have a really special event for you guys today. I'm joined by Matt Frazier, Business Development for Panasonic LUMIX, and Todd White, LUMIX Global Ambassador, located here in Austin, Texas, to talk about the brand new LUMIX S5. Now, if you're unaware of what these kinds of events have been in the past, we normally do these LUMIX Live styled kind of conversations during the week, but we wanted to come to all of you guys and really give you guys the rundown on this brand new addition to the LUMIX LMount system. The S5 is a really exciting camera, and what we're going to do today is kind of cover some of the technical specifications about it, what really kind of makes this camera special in the series. We're going to also talk about some of the cool firmware goodness that's been announced with the camera as well, and really kind of dive in with the actual hands-on impressions from Todd here. So with that, let's kind of jump right into this. So Matt, can you give us kind of a high level of what the idea is for this S5 in the lineup?
Yeah, I think the key with the S5 is that we were trying to take what makes the S1H and the S1 such great photo and video cameras and downsize them into a smaller, lighter weight form factor. And so that's really the way to look at the S5 is it has the video recording power of an S1H, the photo capturing capabilities of an S1, just downsized. So on the photo side of things, it's the 24 megapixel sensor that we use currently in the S1. With one little modification, we've added what we call dual native ISO, which is our secret trick to giving it better low light sensitivity, a little bit better dynamic range. So if you're shooting video at ISOs 640 and 4000, at 4000 it's going to look the same as 640. If you're shooting photos at 100 and ISO 640, they'll look the same as well. So that's one addition that we've made that wasn't in the S1. In addition, we've done things like the high-res shot function that's in the S1. We've added some modifications to it. We've allowed up to an 8-second shutter speed, whereas on the S1 you could only do about a 1-second shutter speed from the high-res shot mode. And by the way, for those of you who don't know high-res shot, I should probably define it for you. That's where the camera's going to move the sensor 8 times because of the in-body stabilization. It's going to capture 8 samples, put them all together, give you a 96 megapixel file. As I said earlier, we're going to allow up to an 8-second exposure. In addition, we'll allow RAW and JPEG photos, whereas the S1 could only do RAW photos internally. And the nice thing is this is an internal function. You don't have to bring the files out and put them into a computer and assemble them. The stabilization system, as I mentioned, is an IBIS or in-body image stabilization system. It's our dual IS system, so it works with the lens as well as the sensor to give you a tremendous amount of stability. It gives you up to 6.5 stops of stabilization actually for photography and some of the best looking video stabilization on the market. One of my favorite additions for photography is something called Live View Composite. This is an awesome feature for like astrophotography, or if you like to do cityscapes and you want to add some of the blur of the vehicles driving through the city, or if you're doing light painting, this feature is a godsend. I call it a smart or intelligent bulb mode. I think that's the easiest way for people to understand this. Traditionally with a bulb mode, what you're doing is you're going to hold the shutter, you're going to let it run for maybe a minute, maybe 10 minutes, maybe 30 minutes, you're going to release the shutter. The problem there is that any ambient light that's there begins to pollute your image, and it creates a washed out looking image. So the star trails aren't going to be as easy to spot. You're not going to be able to see the black night sky behind that cityscape. So what we've done is we use a shorter shutter interval. You can choose a shorter shutter interval in this case, maybe like a 10-second or 20-second interval. And what we'll do is we'll take an initial baseline photo, and then we'll take photos after that, and we only add new information. And the cool thing is you can see it all build on the back of the screen in real time. So you can start the process. When you get the result that you like on the back of your LCD screen, you end the process, and you've got a nice RAW or JPEG image ready to process. On the video side of things, what we've done is really taken as much S1H stuff as we can put into this small chassis without causing it to thermal or overheat on you. And we're giving you everything we possibly can. So you get 10-bit internal recording up to 4K 60p, which is, again, that's an S1H feature. That's not even in the S1. You're going to have access to 422 10-bit at up to 4K 30p. We're going to include Vlog. We're going to include vGamut free of charge. You don't have to pay to unlock those features. To give you an idea of how far we're pushing this, we're even giving you the Academy region anamorphic functionality. So if you want to mix this with anamorphic lenses, you can de-squeeze those right in the camera. It's in the traditional 4:3 aspect ratio, so it works perfectly for anamorphic production. We can even stabilize the sensor and optimize it for your anamorphic lenses. So you're getting very high-end S1H features in this camera. We've also rethought some things like our variable frame rate function. We've made it a little bit easier to use by including something called the S and Q mode. So on the top of the mode dial, you can just put it in S and Q. You don't have to constantly make a lot of changes to get the frame rate that you want. So if you want to kick out a quick and easy time lapse, S and Q will do that for you. If you want to get the slow-mo up to 180 frames per second in 1080p, you can also do that with the camera as well. And then there's a lot of video tools in the product. So you're going to have the ability to use dual zebras. You'll also have the ability to use a waveform monitor to set your exposure correctly. And we also include the luminance spot meter. So you can just move a little box and it tells you how many stops over or under a given portion of your images. And then on top of that, we do have some other things planned. I like to jokingly say it wouldn't be a new Panasonic launch if we didn't already have firmware planned for it. So there will be a new firmware update for the camera. That should happen sometime by the end of the year. This firmware adds some tremendous new technologies to the product. The first thing is it's going to add the ability to output RAW over HDMI. So you'll be able to record video RAW with this camera with an external Atomos recorder. We're also going to be adding the ability to do Cinema 4K. So that's a wider aspect ratio of 4K, 4096 by 2160. So you'll be able to record that internally in the camera or to an external recorder. We're also going to be adding additional tools because we're adding these cinema-centric features. We wanted to give you some more cinema-centric tools. So you're going to get things like, you're going to get a vector scope for it. So if you want to properly calibrate white balance because you're doing multiple camera angles, you'll be able to do that. We're going to add master pedestal functions so we can control the darkest black levels to match other cameras. And my personal favorite addition, and the one that we fought the hardest to get, this camera will get our SS gain operation. That's not a boat. That's not like the SS gain, but what it really is it allows you to change how you express shutter speed and gain. Photographers are used to shutter speed and they're used to ISO for gain, but cinematographers, they want to use shutter angle instead of shutter speed, and then they use ISO because they're used to film. Whereas video shooters are used to shutter speed and they're used to gain. They've never really worked with ISO. So you have the ability to customize how those things are expressed.
Yeah. No, it's really insane how much stuff is actually packed into this camera. And I think, you know, for a lot of users, especially like myself, who has made that transition from photography, you know, as my primary mindset into the video space, having a camera that's equally packed for all the photo options that I love to do, like astrophotography and things like that.
Right.
But then be able to use that same tool for things like this, being able to put it up on a you know, tripod and record for streaming, or be able to take the thing and actually go do production with it. It's an amazingly packed tool. But I also know that we didn't just stop with that. I know there are a lot of people out there that have been asking about an update with the lenses for the LMount system. Could you give us a little info as to what we announced with the lenses, Matt?
Yeah, so we've announced a new 85mm f1.7 lens. F1.8 lens. It's going to be compact. It's going to be very lightweight. It's a great companion to the S5, but I think a lot of S-series users are going to snatch this up anyways just because of its small, lightweight, and its beautiful defocused, beautiful bokeh that it produces. In addition, we're going to try to mimic the same size and chassis in some additional lenses. So we're going to do a 24mm. We're going to do a 35mm, and we're also going to do a 50mm. So we should have a very complete set of primes very quickly within the system. And then we also are planning what I think is going to be a brilliant companion to the 20 to 60 lens that is available as a kit with the S5. We're going to offer a 70 to 300 as well. And so we should have all of those lenses out pretty quickly. It's great to see how much we've already expanded the system. And frankly, I think it's important for people to realize that This is an Alliance. It's the LMount Alliance. So you still have a tremendous number of lenses available from Leica, and Sigma has a tremendous number of lenses too. And so in these new generation mirrorless cameras, I would say that if we don't have the best selection of lenses available, we are a very close second to having the absolute biggest selection of lenses in the L-mount.
Yeah, definitely. And talking about the Alliance, I think that's a really, really cool point to mention too, that, you know, one of the things, you know, to really reinforce the LMount Alliance idea is what we're doing at launch with the S5. So while you're once pre-orders start on this camera, which by the time you all are viewing this has started, in some of the regions out there, actually most of the regions out there, there is a launch promotion going on where pre-order the S5 camera, and you as a user are getting the 45mm Sigma f2.8 for free. So it really reinforces that whole concept that this system as a whole, counting Sigma, Leica, and Panasonic, there's a lot of synergy there in the products themselves. I mean, I have the 45mm mounted on my S5 right here, and it was one of the lenses chosen for that because it fits the body so well. And I mean, let's face it, a lot of us shoot 50mm as that kind of, that's the normal focal length that, you know, you want to use,
Yeah.
quote unquote normal. And it just works awesome. You know, you get the aperture ring that works with the system, you get manual focus, you get the autofocus with it, and it matches perfectly with it. So moving on to this, you know, kind of the actual, like, all right, cool, the specs and everything are great, but how is the camera actually in the field? And this is why, like, I'm so excited that we got to work with you on this project, Todd. You know, we've talked a lot over the last a couple of years about wanting to get, you know, something of this style in with your type of photography. Could you give us a little bit of, you know, kind of background on the project that you shot for us at the launch of this camera?
Sure. So y'all came to me probably 4 or 5 months ago about working on a project for the S5, and right off the bat, when I first received this camera, my first thought was, finally, this really fits that sweet spot. It's that little piece that I felt was missing, because I've been shooting with the S1R, the S1, and the S1H for a while now, and love those cameras, and they're great, but sometimes I just needed something that I could grab that was a smaller form factor, slip into my camera bag, and take off to go create content. Because quite frankly, some of the shootings that I do and the style that I shoot with is really a run and gun format, and I like to be inconspicuous and get in there and get my shots and get what I need and move on. And this camera really fits that style. But I also love the fact that it has all those features that Matt was talking about that really lean into that S1H style of video as well. So for me, it just fits right in between the S1 and the S1H just perfectly. And so going back to my style, I shoot a lot of fashion and commercial work, and that's about a 50-50 between photo and video. In fact, the majority of my clients hire me and they want stills and video content just to create a nice, well-rounded group of images and video that they can use to promote their brands. And so this just fits perfectly into that and for my style and what I do. So for this project, there were 3 videos that I produced for this particular camera right off the bat, and one of them was a lifestyle shoot that I did and shot everything with the continuous autofocus and shot that in 60 frames right out to my Ninja 5, and it worked perfect. And the second shoot that I did was a fashion shoot for one of my clients, and I was already going to be doing a fall lookbook for them, so I used this camera and shot in studio. And then we also went out and shot on the streets of Austin to produce the editorial content. And Sean actually was on the first part of that shoot with me, which was really cool. And then the last project that I did was featuring a glass blowing artist up in Salado, Texas. And so there's a guy up there named Gail, and I thought it'd be really cool to interview him, talk about how he got started, and just his whole approach to blowing glass and creating amazing pieces of art. And so I spent a couple days with him doing an interview and then filming him working, and was able to put this camera through the paces, both shooting in 24, 30, and 60, and it just, because it was small and working in a little bit of a tight space, especially around the fire and the blowing and moving quickly between different places in the studio, it just worked out great for that. It really did.
Hey, Sean, I got a question really quick, actually. So Todd, when you were shooting that stuff in the glass factory or the Glassworks factory, was it pretty cold in there?
No, it was not. In fact, there were 3 ovens at 2,000 degrees and higher for each oven, and I was shooting with this camera. A lot of it was at 30 and 60, and a portion of it was out to the Ninja. And I know where you're going with this question, Matt. And I did not experience any overheating. There were no shutdowns. There was no needing to let the camera cool off before I could continue shooting. And I was in there shooting for at least 2 to 3 hours at a time.
So you're saying in Salado, Texas, where there's 2,000 degree blast furnaces, no shutdowns. I'm sorry that I had made my intentions so apparent to you already, but yes, that's kind of what I was getting at. So I appreciate you taking my lead there and running with it. Thank you very much.
And to add to it, it was in a warehouse that was a metal building, and it was about 95 degrees outside, and we were shooting in the summer. So there you go.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the cool things that I've loved about shooting with this camera too. Is just like you said, at the one day at the studio, when I was able to actually get out there and kind of work with you on this, it was stupid hot outside, and being able to go in and outside, not have to really ever think about, is the camera going to work? Is it going to be reliable for what I needed to do? That's the whole thing that has always drawn me personally to Panasonic, even before I worked for the company, because they're just reliable tools. And so I'm curious, with working in the field that you do, like with fashion and the video side, how did you feel the files handled? When you took them in and actually were working on the final products?
They handled perfectly. I mean, I shot in Vlog for everything that I shot for the video side of it, and it worked just as if I was shooting with my S1H and pulling my files out and working with those as well. I was able to grade it just fine, no issues at all. I used the Vericam LUT to go from the Vlog to the Rec 709, and then I grade from there to Taste, and it was, I might as well have been working with my S1H files. It was perfect. There wasn't any issue at all.
Yeah. So one of the things that, we also talked about, Matt, at the beginning was this live view composite kind of feature that's in this camera. And right now, this is the second camera that we have in the lineup that deploys this. And to my knowledge, this is the first full frame camera to actually have this kind of technology built into it. And I actually wanted to touch on that a little bit because it's easy to kind of like say, hey, yeah, for long exposure work, it's cool because you watch it build, but there's so many cool use cases for it. Like our LUMIX live stream that we did with Luke last week, we talked a lot about the capabilities that you have, as you mentioned, for light painting. The fact that a lot of styles of photography for long exposure, it's a lot of shoot, wait, check the image, and then reshoot again to see, okay, hey, that skyline was too overblown, or, it's too dark in the shadow here. This mode really massively changes what people's ability to get into that kind of photography really is. And the reason I bring this up is because there's a kind of shot that I've always tried to get where it's a well-lit city skyline, and having the actual stars in the sky show above the city, either light trails or the pinpoints of light. And the fact that the S5 has that live composite in there meant that I could go just outside of the city, close to where I live, set the camera up to watch downtown Austin on a clear night, and just flip live view composite on and watch the stars trail through the sky. Where before, to do the same kind of shot, I'd have to take multiple different images, one for the sky, one for the foreground, one for the main subject, and then go into Photoshop and stitch these. So anyone that's done that style of photography before, you know how time consuming a lot of that stuff is. Being able to do it in camera and minimize the amount of time that I'm spending actually in the editing bay is huge, I think, for a lot of people. And it's that kind of thing that I think threads through the Panasonic cameras across the board. Is cameras need to be reliable, and they need to function to better your experience in whether it's photo or video. And I'm curious if both of you guys have, that one thing that the camera was doing that just really stuck out in your heads as, this is what makes me love this camera so much. Matt, is there a mode in there that really does that for you?
Well, I mean, for me, the modes that are most exciting for me personally, number one is going to be the shutter angle edition. That's 100% my number one edition that I'm excited for. I haven't shot shutter speed for a video camera since like the GH3, so it's been a very long time of working with shutter angle. And people think I like shutter angle because I'm pretentious. I am pretentious, but that's not why I like it. I'm a lazy shooter, and I don't want to have to think about changing my shutter speed when I go to do a slow-mo shot. So if I want to go from a 24 frame, project, and I'm adding some 60 frame content or 50 frame content to slow it down, I don't want to have to be changing my shutter speed just to accommodate those slow-mo shots. And then I have to remember again to do it when I come back to the regular frame rate I'm shooting at. So shutter angle is just a lazy way for me to set it to 180 degrees. I never have to think about it again. It's just always there for me. So it's that level of attention to detail. And frankly, the fact that Panasonic isn't afraid to eat our own young, I guess is the easiest way to look at it. We're not protecting the S1H. We're not protecting our broadcast products against the S5. We're giving filmmakers, we're giving creatives the tools they want. And if it hurts some sales on some of our upper end products, so be it. And so I'm very excited for that feature in particular.
How about you, Todd? Was there a standout feature in your time with the camera?
So I'm going to kind of answer this two ways. Going to your example, Sean, about the live view composite feature. I don't really shoot star trails, but it was part of what was asked of me was to go out and create some images like that. And I don't do it, and in fact there wasn't a manual to go to even look at to do that with the camera, but it was super easy just to pop it in the menu, glance over what the options were, set it up, and do it. And I actually shot, that was my first time doing star trails using a live view composite, and it was super easy. And so in fact Matt gave me feedback that one of the images came out great from it, so I was like, yes. But that's a testament to the camera of how easy it is to use, and it's simple to dive into that. But based on what I do and the work that I create, the autofocus, the continuous autofocusing on this camera is amazing. That's a new feature that is definitely a standout for me. Really is. And I could tell the difference.
Nice. Yeah, and that's kind of that thing. There's when it comes to autofocus, yes, there are always improvements that we can make in autofocus, and I think for the different platforms that people want to shoot in or the different styles of photography, there's a camera that's right for you in the platform. Cameras like the S1H that have the Netflix Post Technology Alliance certification, those are going to be on sets. A lot of times you may have a focus puller, but having continuous autofocus is an important thing. And I think as the reviews are showing and as you've testified to here, it's definitely an improvement over what you've seen in the previous LUMIX cameras. So as someone who doesn't shoot a ton of video where I need it to be, run and gun style tracking everybody, I honestly have loved our autofocusing. I mean, I use autofocusing for our LUMIX live events every single week, and I have never heard a single person make a comment about it. So I think it's great.
And I think, Sean, there's a distinction between autofocus continuous for photography in the camera and the video-based autofocus. And I think on the autofocus continuous side, for burst photography. I shoot my kids' basketball games, and in the summer he's had summer league going on with his AAU team. Clearly our autofocus systems previously were a challenge for shooting these type of scenarios. The S5 is an absolute joy to use for autofocus continuous now. It is a substantial improvement for its continuous autofocus for photography. And so while we're not quite perfect on the video side, and you can put the camera into its APS-C region and get exceptionally good autofocus from it for video, none of those caveats exist on the photo side. That autofocus continuous system is legit. It is phenomenal in the camera.
Very, very true. Well, so this has been, kind of a really cool conversation, about, kind of what's going on with this camera. Anyone that wants to, dig more into detail about the high-level specs that we covered here, or wants to check out Todd's photos, videos, follow Todd on social media, we'll have a ton of information available online about it. But hey, Todd, can you give everyone kind of a shout out as to where they can find you online?
Sure. The best place to find me online is going to be on Instagram, which is just @ToddWhite. And then I've also got a website, which is toddwhite.org.
Very cool. And Matt, everyone knows where they can find you. Every once in a while, you're on LUMIX Live with me. Everyone knows where they can find me. But outside of that, I want to thank you guys for taking the time out of your day to join me for this. I think, this is a really exciting time for the LMount system, for photographers that are fans of Panasonic LUMIX, and for photographers in general. We look forward to seeing what everyone creates with these cameras, and keep paying attention to all the different social channels with this. We love to see what content you guys create. Just make sure to tag all of us out there, and we will see you guys in the next video.
Panasonic.